Hey guys, what's going on? ZeroArmada here. We're going to talk about how to get the best performance that you can out of your Blacklight Retribution PC game, because obviously not everyone has a top-of-the-line gaming PC. So we're just going to go over some things that you can do to kind of give yourself a little bit more consistency in terms of frame rate, in terms of the in-game settings, as well as things that you can do out of game to make a difference in terms of how you can play. And having a consistent frame rate is crucial, because it's pretty much just imagine yourself trying to aim with a gun while you're in a swamp and you're basically sinking, and like you're limited in your movement, you're limited in how you can aim because of the bottlenecks, and how the game is not performing at a level where you can consistently aim one to one, or you can consistently move without having a lag spike or something to happen that can kind of hinder your performance in game. So first things first, we're going to talk about video settings, because that's probably the biggest thing you can do. If you have a lower end rig, you definitely want to have your actual detail settings on low or minimum if applicable, and those are probably the biggest things you can do to basically impact your performance. As a last resort, you can always lower your resolution. That can definitely give you a lot more frame rate. Windowed mode, you really want it on full screen or borderless. I've noticed that if you actually have it on windowed mode, you actually have a huge drop in performance. And then some of the actual advanced details, you definitely want DirectX 11 disabled if you are having issues. That's a huge performance hog, so I would disable that. I would enable frame rate smoothing because I actually uncaps your FPS. The game actually, I think it's still caps your FPS by default. They might have actually taken that out from a recent patch, but frame rate smoothing basically uncaps your frame rate, so I would leave that enabled unless you have, like, if you're hovering around 60 frames or so, then you might want to enable VSync if you're experiencing like tearing or visual artifacts. But aside from that, frame rate smoothing is the way to go. And then I have mostly everything else disabled. Dynamic shadows I actually keep enabled because you can actually see people's shadows on the walls. So you can technically see someone above you based upon their shadow and stuff like that. So that's kind of cool to have on. Other things that might help, I typically have distortion, bloom, all this stuff is typically disabled, not only to save performance, but they actually kind of get in the way when you aim and stuff like that. So those are typically things that you want to have disabled because they actually get in the way, and they're kind of nuisances overall. So those are things you can also do to kind of at least increase your performance. Just disable most of the stuff and lower your settings as much as possible in game. But that's probably common sense, at least for most people. So a couple other things you can do out of game as well. First off, if you actually lag, I kind of just figured this out from a dev. I was talking to a dev about this, but if you actually lag when you start to HRV and you actually get an FPS drop when you're HRVing, basically when you HRV, it actually pulls out a file, I guess, from the client. So it actually does a read operation on your hard disk. So what you want to do is, if you have an SSD, you actually want to put the game client on an SSD, and you'll actually notice a game improvement in terms of performance. So that's something you can do. Other things that are actually helpful: defrag your system. If you haven't done any defrags lately, you definitely want to go and defrag your disk. CC Cleaner is a good program to actually remove unwanted files, such as unwanted cookies, registry errors, stuff like that. And I'll link you guys to all these programs down below in the description box. But computer maintenance can go a long way in terms of keeping your computer, somewhat in the best performance that they can possibly have. So that's kind of where most of the stuff is coming from. So you have CC Cleaner, you have defrags, disk defrags. Other things that could be helpful is, of course, removing unnecessary programs from your startup screen. So for instance, if you're launching Skype, if you're launching Steam, and you have like 2 gigs of RAM or something like that, Blacklight's a really resource intensive game. It takes up a lot of memory. So you really want to close out all other programs that are outside of your game to maximize the performance as much as you can, because those background programs, even if they're small, like Adobe Updater or something like that, they still take up a hit on your performance because they're still being utilized in the background while you're playing the game. So removing unwanted programs while you're launching the game in the background, and if anything else is launched, I would just close out of it if you don't really need it. Like, maybe you want to keep Mumble if you have a client or something like that and you're communicating with them, or maybe Xfire or Steam, something like that. It's okay, but just keep in mind that whatever programs you have running, they're taxing your system and they're taking up resources while you're playing. So that can help out extremely if you close those out while you're playing, if you're noticing some frame rate issues. And then one other thing, there's actually a lot of system configuration files that can be modified. I'll link you guys to some of those in the description box as well. Those basically it's basically consider having the video settings page with a bunch of other options that you can't really normally access, but you can access them through the config files, and these take care of a lot more detailed things that you normally, like I said, can't really access. So I'll link you guys to some of the system config files that you can also modify and use for your game, and they'll actually lower your settings beyond what's capable in the actual in-game settings. So that's pretty nifty as well, and that's kind of something that's probably a last resort. If you don't know what you're doing, that's probably something I would hold off on doing until you've tried pretty much every other option available. But that's pretty much it for this video. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have anything else you want to add to kind of help out other players in terms of getting the best performance they can out of their system, definitely leave a comment down below. And thanks for watching as always, guys. Much appreciated.